Alara moved like a phantom on the periphery of the Silverwood pack, a constant, living testament to what they considered a failing. Whispers followed her like a second shadow, each one a sharp dart reminding her of her inability to shift into a wolf, a fundamental rite of passage, a very definition of their kind. She was an anomaly, a human among werewolves, and the isolation was a cold, constant companion. Daily she navigated the subtle taunts and the overt pity, the sidelong glances that questioned her very bloodline, her worth within a community built on strength and transformation. She yearned for more than mere acceptance. She dreamed of proving herself, of showcasing a strength that didn't manifest in fur and fangs, despite the pervasive belief that her perceived weakness rendered her insignificant. Her small cottage, nestled at the furthest edge of the village where the forest began to thicken, felt less like a home and more like a carefully constructed barrier between her and the jeering world. Within its quiet solitude, Alara honed her senses, observed the shifting winds, and learned the subtle language of the woods, a world that seemed to accept her more readily than her own pack. She knew the ancient herbs, read the hidden signs in animal tracks, and understood the nuanced changes in the seasons. These were strengths no one acknowledged, skills deemed trivial when weighed against the raw power of a shifted wolf. Yet she clung to them, hoping that one day they might be enough. A palpable buzz of excitement, tinged with anxiety, rippled through the Silverwood settlement a few weeks later. The Alpha King, Leekin, a formidable leader whose very presence commanded respect and a flicker of fear, was seeking a mate. The announcement solidified into a grand gathering, a selection process to find a Luna worthy of his power and the pack's future. Every eligible she-wolf, strong and proud in their wolf forms, preened and prepared, their ambitions a tangible hum in the air. Alara, despite her ostracization, felt an inexplicable, almost magnetic pull towards this Leekin, a chieftain she had only ever seen from a distance, a figure of remote authority. It wasn't love, not yet, but a strange resonance, a feeling that defied all logic given her circumstances. The thought of attending the gathering, of even standing amongst the other contenders, felt both audacious and utterly terrifying. How could she, the unshifting one, even dream of such a position? The pack elders, their faces etched with centuries of tradition, merely reinforced her anxieties. Their words, cloaked in polite concern, were clear as crystal. Perhaps, Alara, it would be best for you to observe from a respectful distance. This is a matter of pack lineage, of true wolf strength. Their subtle discouragement was more potent than any outright banishment, solidifying her status as an eternal outsider. They didn't need to say you don't belong. Their expressions said it all. The crushing weight of their expectations, or rather, their lack of expectation for her, was a heavy cloak. Yet, a stubborn, unyielding ember flickered within Alara's heart, a defiant spark refusing to be extinguished entirely. This inner fire, this inexplicable connection to a destiny she couldn't yet comprehend, would soon ignite a journey far beyond the boundaries of their prejudiced traditions. Subscribe now to witness Alara's extraordinary journey of self-discovery and destiny. Leekin, the formidable Alpha King, moved with a quiet power that belied his immense responsibilities. He was a figure of unwavering strength, his reputation echoing far beyond the Silverwood territory, a leader truly respected by his pack. Yet, beneath the stoic exterior, a constant burden weighed heavily on his mind. The imperative to find a Luna, a mate strong enough to stand by his side and lead their people. His gaze often swept across the pack gatherings, assessing each eligible she-wolf, but none truly resonated with the profound connection he instinctively sought. Occasionally, his eyes would snag on Alara, a flicker of curiosity igniting within him despite his inner doubts. He wasn't blind to her inability to shift, a perceived weakness that, by all pack standards, disqualified her from even consideration. Yet there was something in her posture, a quiet resilience, an unusual light in her eyes that tugged at his wolf's instincts, a sensation he immediately dismissed as illogical. The pack's future depended on a strong, shifting Luna, not an enigma. The burden on Leekin was not merely internal. A shadow was beginning to stretch across their borders, a growing menace from the rival Shadowfang pack. Reports filtered in of their aggressive scouting parties encroaching further and further into Silverwood lands, their intentions clearly hostile. This escalating external pressure only amplified the urgency of Leekin's search for a Luna. He needed a partner who could unite, strengthen, and protect their people against this burgeoning threat. The thought of war, a brutal, inevitable clash, gnawed at him, demanding a mate whose strength wasn't just physical, but spiritual and strategic. To address this pressing need, Lycan initiated a series of challenges and ceremonies, grand affairs designed to test the mettle of potential Lunas. These weren't mere beauty pageants, they were trials of leadership, resourcefulness, and courage, aimed at identifying a true leader for the Silverwood Pack. The first challenge involved navigating a complex forest maze, not just for speed, but for efficiency in aiding simulated fallen pack members. The second tested their knowledge of ancient pack lore and diplomacy, assessing their wisdom and ability to mediate disputes. The third focused on strategic thinking, presented as a hypothetical defense scenario against a Shadowfang raid. The Silverwood She-Wolves, eager to prove their worth, participated with fierce determination, showcasing their impressive wolf forms and innate agility. They moved with confidence, their fur gleaming, their snarls echoing through the training grounds as they demonstrated their prowess. Lycan watched, observing every nuance, every strength and weakness. He saw many capable warriors, many intelligent minds, but still that elusive spark, that profound connection remained just out of reach. Then, against all odds, Elara appeared. She stood at the edge of the assembly, a lone figure amidst a sea of powerful shifters. Her presence immediately drew sneers and open mockery from the other she-wolves, their condescending whispers an audible hum. "What is she doing here?" one scoffed, her eyes raking over Elara's deceptively fragile human form. "Does she think this is a game for pups?" Another jeered, a cruel laugh rippling through their ranks. Even some of the male pack members exchanged bewildered glances, their expressions ranging from pity to outright disdain. Elara felt the weight of their judgment, the familiar sting of their scorn, but something within her had shifted. It wasn't logic or hope for acceptance, but a primal, undeniable instinct that had propelled her forward. A deep-seated feeling, a resonance with the very essence of the pack, a sense of belonging that defied her unshifting status, urged her to participate. She knew she couldn't compete in physical challenges in the same way, but her intuition, sharpened by years of quiet observation, told her there was more to leadership than brute force. With a quiet resolve that surprised even herself, Elara stepped forward, ready to face whatever ridicule and challenge lay ahead, driven by a destiny she was only just beginning to understand. Elara's brave decision to step forward into the Luna selection process was immediately met with a tidal wave of open derision, crashing down upon her like a cold, unforgiving sea. The other she-wolves, sleek and powerful in their shifting forms, did not even bother to mask their disdain. Their laughter was sharp, their glances filled with a mixture of contempt and disbelief. "Look at her, the human, thinking she can stand among us," one scoffed, her voice dripping with venom, her wolf ears twitching in amusement. "Does she truly believe the Alpha King would ever consider someone who cannot even embrace their true nature?" Another added, her eyes narrowing as if Elara were an offensive stain on their pristine gathering. Even some of the male pack members, usually more reserved, shook their heads, murmuring among themselves about her audacity, questioning her right to even breathe the same air as potential Lunas. The very air around her seemed to thicken with their judgment, a palpable wave of disapproval that sought to push her back, to remind her of her place on the fringes. Their mockery was a constant, gnawing presence, a chorus of voices eager to tear down her resolve. Alpha King Lycan, observing from his elevated position, felt a complex mix of intrigue and frustration. He watched Elara, a lone figure standing tall amidst the storm of ridicule, and a strange admiration flickered within him for her sheer resilience. Her refusal to be cowed by the pack's scorn was remarkable, an unexpected defiance that resonated with a part of him that valued strength beyond the purely physical. Yet his internal struggle was fierce. The expectations of his pack, the weight of tradition hammered at his consciousness. A Luna must shift. It was an unspoken law, a fundamental requirement. How could he, the Alpha, even contemplate choosing someone who defied the very essence of their werewolf nature? The thought was scandalous, almost heretical. He knew his elders would never countenance it, and the pack, already facing external threats, needed unwavering unity. Despite these logical barriers, an undeniable, almost magnetic pull toward Elara persisted. It defied logic, it contradicted every tenet of his upbringing. Yet it was there, a subtle thrumming beneath his skin, hinting at a connection he simply couldn't explain or easily dismiss. He found himself searching for her in the crowd, his gaze lingering, trying to decipher the enigma that was Alara. Yet, Alara remained steadfast, her determination an unyielding anchor amidst the tempest of negativity. She understood that she could not compete with their raw power, their shifting abilities, or their predatory instincts. Instead, she focused her formidable intellect and keen observational skills on the challenges that allowed for different kinds of strengths to shine. In the maze, while others sprinted and snarled, she calmly analyzed the terrain, identifying the fastest, safest routes, and reaching the injured pack members with surprising efficiency and a gentle, reassuring touch that no other had offered. Her solutions to the diplomatic disputes were not based on aggression, but on empathy and understanding, proposing compromises that seemed to soothe tensions rather than simply overpower them. She listened intently, absorbed details, and offered perspectives that often highlighted blind spots in the more aggressive, wolf-centric strategies. During the simulated Shadowfang raid, while others barked orders and positioned themselves for frontal assaults, Alara meticulously mapped out defensive perimeters, identified vulnerable points, and suggested contingency plans for retreat and regrouping, minimizing theoretical casualties. She even pointed out subtle environmental cues that could be used to their advantage, details that the physically stronger, but less observant she-wolves had completely overlooked. Her insights were sharp, her reasoning sound, and often without fanfare. She quietly outperformed many of her physically dominant competitors in these non-physical domains. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible shift, but Leekin, with his alpha-sharp mind, began to notice. A seed of doubt about the pack's narrow definition of strength had been planted. He saw a different kind of power in Alara, an intelligence and an emotional depth that resonated deeply, even as his logical mind struggled to reconcile it with the expectations for his Luna. The scorn of the others still stung Alara, but with each hurdle she cleared, a quiet sense of purpose solidified within her, a belief that her unique strengths, though unseen by many, held a value all their own. She was determined to keep pushing, driven by that inexplicable pull towards a future she couldn't yet define, a future that somehow intertwined with the formidable Alpha King. The external threat from the Shadowfangs now intensified dramatically, their aggressive probings escalating past mere territorial encroachments. Attacks became more frequent and audaciously bolder, no longer content with skirmishes at the periphery. Isolated hunting parties from the Silverwood pack were ambushed, supply convoys were harassed, and most alarmingly, small vulnerable outposts guarding the remote grazing lands were struck with vicious precision. The Shadowfangs were no longer testing boundaries, they were actively seizing territory, their movements hinting at a meticulously planned campaign of attrition designed to weaken Silverwood before a larger confrontation. News of these raids spread through the Silverwood village like wildfire, igniting fear and anger in equal measure, but also a growing sense of desperation. The need for a unified pack, one capable of standing shoulder to shoulder against such malevolence, grew paramount with every new report of Shadowfang aggression. Consequently, the pressure on Leekin to secure a strong Luna, one who could inspire confidence and offer strategic partnership, became an almost unbearable burden. The Alpha King found himself besieged by his elders, their voices urgent, their faces etched with worry. They implored him, almost demanded, that he choose a Luna swiftly. Their council consistently favored powerful shifters, individuals whose bloodlines boasted long histories of strength and leadership, women who commanded respect through their undeniable physical prowess and their ability to lead in wolf form. Names like Seraphina, a formidable warrior with an ancestral claim to a distinguished pack lineage, were whispered constantly. The emphasis was always on physical might, on the visible signs of a Luna capable of defending the pack with tooth and claw. For Alara, this shift in focus was a crushing blow. Her quiet hope, nurtured by her small successes in the non-physical challenges, began to dwindle. The pack's narrative was increasingly dominated by the dire need for brawn, for a Luna who could visibly transform and fight, leaving no room for her unique, unconventional strengths. She felt her path closing, her chances evaporating like morning mist, as the pack's anxieties solidified their traditional prejudices. One brisk afternoon, A minor Shadowfang skirmish erupted dangerously close to the pack borders, not far from the perimeter where several Silverwood children had been playing under the watchful, if somewhat distracted, eyes of a few older wolf guards. The attack was swift and brutal, a small scouting party of Shadowfangs attempting to snatch a few young ones for reasons unknown. Panic ensued. The guards, though brave, were outnumbered and caught off guard. In the ensuing chaos, with shouts and snarls echoing through the trees, Alara, who had been gathering herbs nearby, found herself unexpectedly thrust into the heart of the skirmish. Without a moment's hesitation, driven by an instinct far deeper than fear, she sprang into action. She couldn't shift, but her human form, often deemed a weakness, became her unexpected advantage. Her agility, honed by years of navigating the dense forest, and her intimate knowledge of hidden pathways, allowed her to move through the fray with surprising speed and stealth. While the bulky wolves battled head-on, Alara darted and wove, her movements a blur of calculated efficiency. She didn't fight the Shadowfangs directly. Instead, she focused on protection and diversion. With a quick glance, she assessed the terrified children, realizing they were the primary targets. Calling upon her cunning and quick thinking, she created a distraction, yelling loudly, throwing rocks, and even setting off a small dry brush fire. She quickly stomped out, but enough to draw the attention of one of the attacking Shadowfangs away from a trapped child. She then used her small stature to slip between the legs of a Shadowfang warrior, momentarily disorienting him, allowing a cornered she-wolf guard to recover and strike. Alara then rapidly guided 3 smaller children through a thicket she knew intimately, leading them to a hidden hollow, shielding them with her own body as she whispered soothing words, her presence a calming anchor amidst their terror. Her actions, though not involving claws or fangs, were nothing short of heroic. She had demonstrated not just courage but an innate strategic brilliance and a selfless dedication to protecting the vulnerable, effectively using her weakness as a tool for salvation. Leekin, having witnessed Alara's bravery firsthand during the skirmish, felt a profound shift in his perception. He had arrived just as Alara was ushering the last of the children to safety, seeing with his own eyes the cunning and selflessness she displayed. The scene was indelible. Alara, small and vulnerable in her human form, yet radiating an undeniable strength as she stood protectively over the cowering pups. He observed her composure under the intense pressure of the Shadowfang attack, a calm resolve that many seasoned warriors struggled to maintain. It was a stark contrast to the initial chaos and fear that gripped the others. Her actions hadn't involved brute force, no snarling or tearing, but an intelligent, almost elegant redirection of energy that saved lives. This wasn't merely courage. It was a deeper, more strategic form of bravery, an innate understanding of survival that transcended physical prowess. The image of her shielding the children, her eyes alight with fierce determination, began to etch itself into his memory, slowly but surely replacing the ingrained prejudice against her unshifting status. He started to see beyond the superficial lack of a wolf form, recognizing a different kind of power, a power rooted in intellect, empathy, and unwavering self-sacrifice. His admiration for her, once a nascent, unacknowledged pull, now began to solidify into something more concrete, something that challenged every conventional belief he held about what made a worthy Luna. As news of Alara's heroic intervention spread through the Silverwood pack, whispers began to circulate, quieter at first, but steadily gaining momentum. Some pack members, particularly those who had witnessed her actions or heard the children's retelling, started to wonder if perhaps Alara possessed a different kind of strength, one they had overlooked in their rigid adherence to tradition. "She may not shift, but she saved those pups," an older she-wolf muttered to her neighbor, a thoughtful frown creasing her brow. "More effectively than some of our own who did shift," one might argue. A few younger members, less bound by the ingrained prejudices of their elders, openly expressed their awe. "She was like a shadow, quick and clever," one young male recounted, his eyes wide with admiration. Yet, despite these nascent shifts in perspective, the dominant belief in the necessity of a wolf form for a Luna persisted, a deep-rooted conviction that had been passed down through generations. The elders, while acknowledging her bravery, still maintained a skeptical distance, their expressions signaling that one act of courage, however impressive, could not erase centuries of tradition. They clung to the idea that a Luna must be capable of leading a charge, of presenting a formidable presence in her shifted form, a visible symbol of power. Elara's bravery was commendable, they conceded, but insufficient to bridge the chasm between her human form and the requirements of the Luna. Despite her recent actions, despite the growing, albeit hesitant, admiration from some corners of the pack, Elara still grappled intensely with her perceived inadequacy. The years of ridicule, the ingrained belief that she was somehow less, weighed heavily on her spirit. She felt the constant, invisible pressure of the pack's judgment, an omnipresent force that eroded her self-worth. Her mind replayed the mocking jeers, the dismissive glances, reinforcing the old wounds. Was her bravery merely an anomaly, a momentary surge of adrenaline, rather than a true indication of her potential? Could one act truly erase a lifetime of being told she didn't belong, that she wasn't enough? She questioned if she could ever truly earn the respect she craved, let alone lead a pack that fundamentally doubted her very nature. The thought of stepping into a leadership role, especially as Luna, seemed an insurmountable task. How could she inspire confidence when she herself harbored such deep-seated doubts about her own ability to stand tall among them? The dichotomy between her courageous actions and her internal struggle was a heavy burden, a silent battle she waged within herself, even as the pack began to slowly, grudgingly, acknowledge her unique, unconventional power. Leekin, disturbed by the lingering image of Elara's bravery and the surprising depth of her quiet resolve, found himself drawn to her. He sought her out, not in the formal setting of a pack meeting or a Luna selection ceremony, but in the tranquil solitude near the stream where she often gathered herbs. Their initial conversations were tentative, almost hesitant, but soon blossomed into something deeper, more meaningful than either of them had anticipated. He wasn't seeking a prospective Luna then, but rather, he was driven by an honest, burning curiosity to understand the woman who had defied every expectation. They spoke of the forest, of its hidden rhythms and ancient secrets, a language Leekin himself knew well, but Elara spoke with an intimacy he found captivating. She shared her observations about the subtle shifts in animal behavior, the predictive patterns of weather, and the medicinal properties of plants, knowledge that, while not wolfish, was undeniably powerful and practical. He discovered her sharp intellect, a mind that approached problems with a different perspective, often seeing solutions where others saw only obstacles. He found himself revealing his own burdens, the weight of leadership, the anxieties about the Shadowfangs, and she listened, truly listened, offering insights that were both wise and refreshingly unbiased. In these quiet moments away from the judgmental eyes of the pack, an unexpected bond began to form, a profound connection cemented by shared understanding and mutual respect. Her calm presence was a balm to his often turbid thoughts, and he found himself seeking her company with increasing frequency, drawn to the quiet strength and unique wisdom that emanated from her. This was more than mere admiration. It was an inexplicable pull, a resonance that echoed deep within his very being, challenging his long-held beliefs about leadership and companionship. The pack, however, was not blind to Leekin's growing interest in the unshifting Elara. Whispers, once confined to Elara's presence, now turned their attention to their alpha king. The elders, their faces grim with disapproval, began to voice their concerns more openly, their displeasure a palpable weight in every council meeting. Alpha, the most senior elder, a stern-faced wolf named Boren, stated unequivocally, his voice low and firm, "Our traditions are the bedrock of our strength. A Luna must be a full wolf, capable of shifting, capable of leading our warriors in battle in her true form." Another elder added, "To choose one who cannot shift sends a message of weakness to our allies and, more dangerously, to our enemies, the Shadowfangs. It invites further aggression." They emphasized the ancient traditions, the sacred lineage of Lunas who had always been powerful, shifting she-wolves. The danger of a non-shifting Luna, they argued, was not merely symbolic. It was a practical threat to the pack's survival in these increasingly perilous times. They saw Leekin's affection for Elara not as a blossoming connection, but as a dangerous vulnerability, a deviation from the path of strength and stability. Yet amidst the chorus of disapproval, a different, quieter narrative began to emerge, circulating like an ancient river beneath the surface of the pack's rigid traditions. Among some of the older, more open-minded members, particularly those who remembered the almost forgotten lore, A long-dormant prophecy began to be revisited. It spoke of a Luna whose power would not manifest in the traditional wolf form, but rather in a hidden form, one that would emerge in a time of dire need and bring salvation to the pack. It was a prophecy often dismissed as fanciful, a myth from a forgotten era, but now, with Lycan's inexplicable bond with Elara and her surprising acts of courage, it gained a new, intriguing resonance. Old Man Tiber, the pack's ancient storyteller, whose memory was a living library of their history, began to recount the fragmented verses of the prophecy with a renewed seriousness. He spoke of unusual signs preceding the arrival of such a Luna, of wisdom beyond years, and a spirit untamed by conventional expectations. His tales, once dismissed as mere entertainment, now sparked hushed conversations and contemplative glances in Elara's direction. Was it possible, some dared to wonder, that this unshifting girl, so scorned and ridiculed, was actually the one foretold in their most sacred, almost forgotten legends? The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating, challenging the very foundations of their understanding, and hinting at a destiny far grander and more complex than any of them could have ever imagined. The uneasy truce that had tenuously held between the Silverwood pack and the Shadowfangs shattered abruptly. The Shadowfang Alpha, a brutal and cunning leader whose reputation for ruthlessness preceded him, made his intentions unequivocally clear. He no longer operated through subtle incursions or harassing ambushes. His message was direct, delivered by a particularly vicious scout he allowed to be captured and then escape, its body bearing fresh, symbolic scars of defiance. The demand was stark and uncompromising. Surrender significant Silverwood territory, including prime hunting grounds and access to their vital freshwater springs, or face an impending large-scale attack that would leave nothing but ashes and despair in its wake. This was not a negotiation. It was a declaration of war, a gauntlet thrown down with chilling certainty. The air around the Silverwood Council fire crackled with tension, fear, and a burning resolve to protect their home. Lycan, his jaw set in a grim line, immediately threw himself into strategic planning, his alpha instincts fully engaged. He convened his war council, reviewing maps, assessing their defenses, and mobilizing every able-bodied warrior. Every elder, every experienced fighter, offered their counsel on troop placements, patrol routes, and the deployment of their limited resources. He listened intently, his mind a whirlwind of tactical considerations, weighing every option for defending his pack against a numerically superior and notoriously cruel foe. It was during these intense, often draining strategic discussions that Lycan found himself subconsciously valuing Elara's presence. She wasn't officially part of the council, of course, but she often hovered at the fringes, tending to the wounded, preparing herbal drafts for the stressed warriors. And as he spoke, detailing troop movements or defensive strategies, he would catch her eye, sometimes unconsciously seeking her subtle nod of understanding or her thoughtful, quiet gaze. He wouldn't openly admit it, not yet, but he found himself subtly adjusting plans, considering angles he hadn't before, based on an unspoken, almost intuitive feedback he received from her. Her insights, though never voiced in a public forum, often seemed to confirm or subtly redirect his own strategic thoughts, a quiet partnership forming in the shadow of impending war. Elara, for her part, felt an unnerving premonition about the impending attack, a cold dread that settled deep in her bones. It wasn't just the overt threats. It was a collection of subtle signs and patterns that others, focused on the obvious, overlooked. She noticed the unusually quiet forests in certain sectors, devoid of the normal chittering of squirrels or the distant howl of a lone wolf, an unnatural silence that spoke of disruption. She saw the migration patterns of birds shifting, veering off their usual courses, as if sensing danger. The stream, normally bustling with life, seemed strangely still in places, its waters murky with an unfamiliar sediment. She observed the behavior of the pack dogs, usually boisterous and playful, now unusually agitated, their low growls aimed at the direction of Shadowfang territory, their hackles raised at unseen threats. While the warriors meticulously checked their weapons and fortified their positions, Elara walked the periphery of their defenses, her senses hyper-attuned. She noted the subtle scent of unfamiliar herbs crushed underfoot near a less-used deer trail, a scent that wasn't native to their lands, a possible indicator of Shadowfang scouts passing through. She traced faint, almost invisible disturbances in the undergrowth that suggested movement patterns too precise for wild animals, too deliberate for casual trespassers. She knew the land intimately, its every secret, every hidden path, every whispering tree. Her unique observational skills, honed by years of quietly living in harmony with nature, allowed her to piece together a mosaic of clues that painted a far more detailed and unsettling picture than the visible preparations for war suggested. She felt the true scale of the Shadowfang leaders' cunning, the depth of their planned assault, far beyond what even Leeken's most experienced scouts had yet reported. It was a terrifying burden, this intuitive knowledge, feeling the threads of a catastrophe weaving closer, sensing the intricate web of deception and violence about to engulf her home. Her heart ached with the urgency to convey the full breadth of what she perceived, but she knew her warnings, coming from the unshifting female, would likely be dismissed as mere apprehension. Yet, the premonition persisted, a chilling certainty that the coming battle would be far more devastating than anyone anticipated. Under immense pressure, the weight of his pack's anxieties and the Shadowfang threat pressing down on him like a physical burden, Leeken knew he could delay no longer. The moment of truth had arrived. He stood before the assembled pack, their anxious faces turned towards him, hungry for reassurance, desperate for the stability and leadership a chosen Luna would represent. His heart, a wild, conflicted beast, pulled him fiercely towards Alara, towards the quiet wisdom and undeniable connection he felt in their shared moments. He had witnessed her unique strength, her selfless courage, her profound empathy. But his duty, his alpha responsibility, the centuries of tradition, and the fervent expectations of his elders weighed heavily, a crushing force that threatened to extinguish that nascent flame. He saw the faces of the council, rigid with anticipation, and knew the words he had to utter, words that would bring a collective sigh of relief to his people, but would simultaneously tear a piece of his own soul. With a deep cleansing breath that did little to calm the turmoil raging within him, Leeken's voice rang out, clear and resonant, though tinged with an almost imperceptible tremor of regret. To the pack's palpable relief, and to Alara's utter heartbreak, he declared his choice. He named not Alara but Seraphina, a powerful, traditionally perfect she-wolf whose lineage was impeccable, whose wolf form was magnificent, and whose physical prowess was unquestioned. His reasons, articulated with a stoic resolve that belied his inner anguish, centered on pack stability and strength, on the visual representation of power that Seraphina embodied, on the need for a Luna who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him in wolf form on the battlefield. He spoke of tradition, of the need for visible unity in the face of their enemies, of ensuring the pack's future through a mate who exemplified their martial heritage. The relief that washed over the assembly was almost palpable, a collective exhale of tension. Cheers erupted, albeit somewhat muted by the solemnity of the occasion, and Seraphina stepped forward, regal and proud, acknowledging the pack's acclamation with a confident nod. Alara, standing amongst the throng, felt as though the very air had been sucked from her lungs. The cheers were a deafening roar, each one a fresh stab to her exposed heart. The declaration, though expected in the logical framework of pack custom, landed on Alara like a physical blow. The public pronouncement, Leeken's chosen words praising the traditional strength she so conspicuously lacked, was a profound and agonizing rejection. She swallowed hard, trying to quell the sudden nausea that threatened to overwhelm her. The world, which for a brief, fragile period had seemed to open up to possibilities, now slammed shut with an echoing finality. All the whispers, all the mockery, all the dismissal, they had been right all along. She was indeed inadequate, unworthy of the Alpha King, unworthy of the pack. She felt a profound sense of failure, not just for herself, but for the fragile hope she had dared to harbor. The belief that her unique strengths might be recognized. Devastated and emotionally raw, Alara retreated. She sought the familiar solace of her small cottage, the one place where the pack's judgment could not reach her. The vibrant forest, once her refuge and her teacher, now felt oppressive, its shadows mimicking the despair in her heart. She avoided the pack, avoiding their pitying glances, their relieved smiles that spoke volumes of their approval for Leeken's sensible choice. The pain was a physical ache, a constant dull throb that made every breath a struggle. She spent her days in a haze of grief, replaying Leeken's words, dissecting his carefully chosen reasons, each one a testament to her perceived shortcomings. The irony was bitter. Her greatest strength, her very humanity, was deemed her greatest flaw. A cold, resolute thought began to solidify in her mind, a desperate attempt to escape the suffocating weight of rejection. She considered leaving the Silverwood Pack altogether. There was no place for her here, no future, no acceptance. She would always be the unshifting one, the outsider. The idea of venturing into the unknown, a perilous journey for a lone human in a world ruled by shifters, was daunting. But the thought of remaining, a perpetual reminder of what she wasn't, was far more terrifying. She packed a small satchel with essentials, a few herbs, dried berries, a water skin. Her heart was heavy, but her resolve, born of profound sorrow, was firm. She would leave, believing she would never find her place, never truly belong, and that her destiny, whatever it might have been, was now irrevocably broken among the trees of the only home she had ever known. She had felt a connection, a purpose, but it had all been a cruel illusion. However, fate, capricious and unyielding, had other plans for Elara and the Silverwood Pack. While she wrestled with her decision to abandon her home, the Shadowfangs launched their massive, coordinated attack. It wasn't just a border skirmish or a strategic probe, it was a full-scale assault, meticulously planned to coincide with the Silverwood Pack's annual Harvest Moon ritual, a time when many pack members were gathered in the central clearing, their minds focused on celebration and gratitude, making them critically vulnerable. The Shadowfangs struck with brutal efficiency, pouring over the less guarded eastern ridge like a tide of snarling darkness, aiming straight for the heart of the clearing. Their primary target was clear: the assassination of Alpha King Leekin, designed to decapitate the pack's leadership and plunge them into irreversible chaos. The air, usually filled with the scent of autumn leaves and wood smoke, was suddenly thick with the stench of fear, blood, and the acrid tang of a desperate battle. Chaos erupted. The Silverwood warriors, despite Leekin's earlier preparations and strategic planning, were caught off guard by the sheer numbers and overwhelming ferocity of the Shadowfang assault. Their defenses, though strong, were stretched thin, and the element of surprise had granted the attackers a horrifying advantage. The celebratory atmosphere of minutes before dissolved into a maelstrom of howls, snarls, and the frantic cries of the wounded. Silverwood wolves fought valiantly, their loyalty fierce, their jaws snapping and claws tearing, but they were being systematically overwhelmed. Leekin, a whirlwind of muscle and fury in his shifted wolf form, was at the forefront, his mighty roars echoing defiance, his fangs tearing through Shadowfang ranks. He fought with the strength of 10, protecting his pack, but even an Alpha King had his limits. The Shadowfangs, driven by their ruthless alpha, converged on him, a relentless tide of dark fur and gleaming teeth. They were clearly under orders to isolate and subdue him, to prevent him from rallying his scattered forces. A particularly vicious Shadowfang brute, larger and more cunning than the rest, managed to slip past Leekin's guard. Its claws raked deep across his flank, a searing pain that made the Alpha stumble, momentarily disoriented. As he tried to regain his footing, another 2 Shadowfangs lunged, pinning him, their combined weight pressing him to the bloodied earth. He struggled, roaring, but the sheer numbers were too much. His vision blurred, his strength waning from the sustained onslaught. He knew with a chilling certainty that this was it. He was cornered, gravely injured, and the Shadowfang Alpha was advancing, a triumphant snarl on its face, ready to deliver the fatal blow. The pack's leader, their protector, was on the brink of collapse, his life hanging by a thread. The Silverwood Pack's hopes began to crumble with him. Meanwhile, Seraphina, the chosen Luna, the embodiment of traditional strength, was also deep in the thick of the battle. She was a powerful shifter, her wolf form magnificent, her fighting skills honed by years of training. She fought bravely, certainly, her snarls matching the ferocity of her foes, but the reality of the brutal, chaotic battle was far removed from the controlled training grounds. The immense pressure, the cacophony of pain and death, the sheer, relentless savagery of the Shadowfangs, was overwhelming. She excelled in direct combat, in leading a charge, but she struggled to adapt to the fluid, unpredictable nature of the full-scale slaughter. Her strength, while considerable, lacked the calm leadership and strategic insight needed in this crisis. She fought with passion, but without the overarching vision or the cool head required to turn the tide. She was a warrior, undeniably, but not the unwavering anchor, the beacon of hope, that the pack desperately needed in this moment of utter despair. Her strength was proving inadequate, a stark contrast to the quiet resourcefulness Alara had consistently shown in less dramatic, yet equally critical moments. The pack, looking to their chosen Luna for guidance beyond brute force, found only furious, desperate combat, adding to the sense of disunity and impending defeat. The ground shook with the violence, the screams of the dying a terrible symphony, and the Silverwood pack was on the precipice of utter annihilation. Alara, having made the difficult decision to leave, was just moments from stepping into the deep forest, her meager satchel clutched tight. But the wind, carrying the acrid tang of smoke and the terrified screams of children, stopped her dead in her tracks. The agonizing wails, the unmistakable roar of Leekin's wolf form, laced with pain and desperation, pierced through the fog of her despair. It wasn't the reasoned thought of duty or the memory of past slights that compelled her. It was a deeper, more visceral instinct, an inexplicable urge to protect her home, her pack, and the Alpha King whose rejection still stung, but whose life now hung in the balance. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to turn back, to run towards the danger, not away from it. The journey she had planned, the escape from her pain, was abruptly cast aside. With a surge of adrenaline, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, Alara spun around and ran, not towards safety, but directly into the heart of the raging battle, driven by a force she couldn't comprehend, yet couldn't deny. The scene that greeted her was one of utter carnage. The central clearing, minutes earlier a place of harvest festivities, was now a blood-soaked tableau of chaos and desperation. Silverwood warriors fought with a grim, losing tenacity against the relentless tide of Shadowfangs. Leekin, their mighty alpha, was indeed in peril. Alara's eyes instantly locked onto his struggling form amidst a snarl of dark fur and flashing teeth. He was pinned, his powerful wolf body gravely injured, barely able to lift his head, his roars now choked gasps. His eyes, clouded with pain and the grim acceptance of defeat, met hers for a fleeting, horrifying moment. He was bleeding profusely, his flank torn, and his labored breaths rattled in the smoky air. The Shadowfang Alpha, a monstrous beast with eyes like burning coals, loomed over him, a triumphant snarl twisting its scarred muzzle. Its massive paws were raised, claws extended, poised to deliver the fatal, crushing blow that would end Leekin's life, and with it, the Silverwood pack's last vestiges of hope. Time seemed to warp, stretching into an agonizing eternity as Alara watched, helpless, just yards away. The world narrowed to that single terrifying image. Leekin, her alpha, dying, and the Shadowfang Alpha ready to seal his fate. A roar of pure, unadulterated primal fury, unlike anything she had ever heard, tore from deep within her. It wasn't a human scream, nor a wolf's howl, but something ancient, guttural, and resonating with unfathomable power. As Leekin's life hung by that slender, fraying thread, something within Alara snapped. It wasn't a choice, it was an eruption. A surge of raw, untamed energy, hot and blinding, coursed through her veins, igniting every cell in her body. Her senses exploded, sharpening to an impossible degree. The smell of blood and fear became overwhelming, the sounds of battle deafening. Yet she felt a strange, profound calm at the epicenter of the storm. A shimmering golden light began to emanate from her, starting from her core and rapidly engulfing her entire frame. Her skin tingled, then burned, not with pain, but with an exhilarating, almost divine heat. Her bones groaned, stretching and reshaping, her muscles coiling with an unbelievable strength she had never known. Her vision blurred, then focused with a new clarity, seeing not just the physical world, but the very essence of the energy flowing around her. She felt herself growing, becoming something vastly more than human, more than wolf. It was a transformation unlike anything seen before, a manifestation of dormant power awakened by the sheer, desperate need to protect the one she loved, the Alpha King whose life she now, inexplicably, held in her hands. The golden light intensified, blinding those around her, forcing both Silverwood and Shadowfang warriors to shield their eyes from the incandescent brilliance that now radiated from where the unshifting Alara had once stood. Her true form, long whispered about in ancient prophecies, was finally revealing itself. The golden light intensified, blinding those around her, forcing both Silverwood and Shadowfang warriors to shield their eyes from the incandescent brilliance that now radiated from where the unshifting Alara had once stood. Her true form, long whispered about in ancient prophecies, was finally revealing itself. But it was not the wolf form everyone expected, the transformation that had been so cruelly denied to her entire life. Instead, Alara didn't shift into a wolf at all. The light coalesced, swirling around her, and when it receded, a magnificent, luminescent creature stood in her place, a form far beyond the understanding of any werewolf. She was a celestial guardian, a spirit beast woven from pure starlight and ancient earth, glowing with an ethereal aura that pulsed with immense, untamed power. Her form was a breathtaking fusion of grace and raw strength, impossibly tall, with shimmering feathered wings that spread wider than any wolf's leap, and eyes that held the wisdom of forgotten ages. Her pelt was not fur, but a cascade of iridescent scales that reflected the chaos of the battle, yet remained untouched by its grime. She was not a predator, but a protector, her energy radiating outward, pushing back the encroaching darkness. This was her true nature, a hidden heritage that no one, not even she, had ever comprehended. With a silent yet deafening roar of pure protective energy, this celestial being surged forward. The Shadowfangs, who had been mere moments from delivering the killing blow to Lycan, were suddenly struck by an invisible force, slamming them backward, sending them sprawling through the air as if they were mere twigs in a hurricane. There was no physical contact, only a wave of sheer, overwhelming power that emanated from Alara's transformed body, a silent repulsion that radiated pure, unadulterated light. She moved with an effortless grace that belied her immense power, positioning herself directly between the struggling Lycan and the stunned Shadowfang Alpha. Her massive feathered wing, shimmering with an inner light, unfurled and wrapped around the fallen Alpha King, shielding him from any further harm. Her presence was a beacon, a living, breathing barrier of divine light that not only drove back the immediate attackers, but also instilled a profound sense of awe and terror in all who witnessed it. The Shadowfang Alpha, for all its brute strength and ruthless cunning, found itself paralyzed, not by physical bonds, but by the sheer unyielding majesty of this unprecedented creature. Its triumphant snarl dissolved into a whimper, its eyes wide with the primal fear it had never known. Both the Silverwood pack and the invading Shadowfangs were utterly stunned into silence. The cacophony of battle, moments before a deafening roar of snarls and screams, died down to an eerie, almost reverent hush. Every wolf, on both sides, stood frozen, their eyes fixated on the luminescent being that now stood guard over their fallen alpha. Their mockery of Alara, the unshifting girl, faded into oblivion, replaced by an overwhelming wave of wonder, disbelief, and for many, an undeniable fear. The Silverwood warriors, whose despair had been absolute, suddenly found a glimmer of hope rekindled, though tinged with confusion. They had scorned her for her perceived weakness, for her human form, and now she stood before them, a literal goddess of light and protection. The Shadowfangs, who had been so confident in their victory, felt their predatory instincts falter, replaced by a deep, ancient terror. This was not a foe they could understand or fight with tooth and claw. This was something supernatural, something mythical, something that defied their very understanding of existence. The air crackled with the raw, untamed power emanating from Alara, a silent testament to the ancient prophecy that had been so carelessly dismissed. The battle had been paused, not by strategy or surrender, but by the sheer, overwhelming presence of a true force of nature, a power that had been hidden in plain sight all along. Her transformation had not merely saved Lycan's life. It had fundamentally shattered the perception of strength and lineage within the entire pack. The golden light intensified, blinding those around her, forcing both Silverwood and Shadowfang warriors to shield their eyes from the incandescent brilliance that now radiated from where the unshifting Alara had once stood. Her true form, long whispered about in ancient prophecies, was finally revealing itself. But it was not the wolf form everyone expected, the transformation that had been so cruelly denied to her entire life. Instead, Alara didn't shift into a wolf at all. The light coalesced, swirling around her, and when it receded, a magnificent, luminescent creature stood in her place, a form far beyond the understanding of any werewolf. She was a celestial guardian, a spirit beast woven from pure starlight and ancient earth, glowing with an ethereal aura that pulsed with immense, untamed power. Her form was a breathtaking fusion of grace and raw strength, impossibly tall, with shimmering feathered wings that spread wider than any wolf's leap, and eyes that held the wisdom of forgotten ages. Her pelt was not fur, but a cascade of iridescent scales that reflected the chaos of the battle, yet remained untouched by its grime. She was not a predator, but a protector, her energy radiating outward, pushing back the encroaching darkness. This was her true nature, a hidden heritage that no one, not even she, had ever comprehended. With a silent yet deafening roar of pure protective energy, this celestial being surged forward. The Shadowfangs, who had been mere moments from delivering the killing blow to Lycan, were suddenly struck by an invisible force, slamming them backward, sending them sprawling through the air as if they were mere twigs in a hurricane. There was no physical contact, only a wave of sheer, overwhelming power that emanated from Alera's transformed body, a silent repulsion that radiated pure, unadulterated light. She moved with an effortless grace that belied her immense power, positioning herself directly between the struggling Lycan and the stunned Shadowfang Alpha. Her massive feathered wing, shimmering with an inner light, unfurled and wrapped around the fallen Alpha King, shielding him from any further harm. Her presence was a beacon, a living, breathing barrier of divine light that not only drove back the immediate attackers, but also instilled a profound sense of awe and terror in all who witnessed it. The Shadowfang Alpha, for all its brute strength and ruthless cunning, found itself paralyzed, not by physical bonds, but by the sheer unyielding majesty of this unprecedented creature. Its triumphant snarl dissolved into a whimper, its eyes wide with a primal fear it had never known. Both the Silverwood Pack and the invading Shadowfangs were utterly stunned into silence. The cacophony of battle, moments before a deafening roar of snarls and screams, died down to an eerie, almost reverent hush. Every wolf on both sides stood frozen, their eyes fixated on the luminescent being that now stood guard over their fallen alpha. Their mockery of Alera, the unshifting girl, faded into oblivion, replaced by an overwhelming wave of wonder, disbelief, and for many, an undeniable fear. The Silverwood warriors, whose despair had been absolute, suddenly found a glimmer of hope rekindled, though tinged with confusion. They had scorned her for her perceived weakness, for her human form, and now she stood before them, a literal goddess of light and protection. The Shadowfangs, who had been so confident in their victory, felt their predatory instincts falter, replaced by a deep, ancient terror. This was not a foe they could understand or fight with tooth and claw. This was something supernatural, something mythical, something that defied their very understanding of existence. The air crackled with the raw, untamed power emanating from Alera, a silent testament to the ancient prophecy that had been so carelessly dismissed. The battle had been paused, not by strategy or surrender, but by the sheer overwhelming presence of a true force of nature, a power that had been hidden in plain sight all along. Her transformation had not merely saved Lycan's life, it had fundamentally shattered the perception of strength and lineage within the entire pack. Alera's true form, a magnificent, glowing entity, became the indisputable turning point of the chaotic battle. She did not engage in aggressive combat as a wolf would, tearing and snarling. Instead, her defense was absolute, her protection impenetrable. A shimmering, almost tangible barrier of light and raw energy pulsed around her and Lycan, radiating outward to encompass the nearest Silverwood warriors. Any Shadowfang that dared to approach was met with an unseen force, thrown backward, or simply found their aggressive intent dissolving into confusion and fear. Their claws seemed to pass through her, leaving no mark, their snarls dying on their lips as her pure, ethereal presence overwhelmed their primal urges. She wasn't fighting. She was simply being, and her being was a force of nature that repelled all aggression. Her unique abilities stemmed not from physical might, but from an almost spiritual authority, a mystical power that bent the will of her enemies without a single strike. She protected, she shielded, she radiated an overwhelming, undeniable presence that made further attack utterly futile. The Shadowfang Alpha, a creature of malice and cunning, found itself utterly bewildered and deeply terrified. It had never encountered such a phenomenon, such an insurmountable obstacle. Its brute force tactics, its psychological warfare, its sheer viciousness, all were rendered useless against this glowing, silent guardian. Its eyes, moments before filled with triumphant bloodlust, now darted wildly, reflecting a profound, instinctual fear that gnawed at its very core. This was an enemy it could not understand, an abnormality that broke every rule of engagement it knew. With a guttural snarl that was more a confession of defeat than a threat, the Shadowfang Alpha made a terrifying, instinctive decision. It let out a piercing, high-pitched howl that echoed across the battleground, a command for full retreat. Its forces, already reeling from the shock and awe of Alera's presence, did not hesitate. They turned and fled, a wave of dark fur disappearing back into the treeline, their previous ferocity replaced by a desperate scramble for survival. The mystical abilities of Alera's true form had not simply repelled them, they had broken their will to fight. Lycan, slowly recovering from his grievous injuries under the protective embrace of Alera's shimmering wing, watched the Shadowfang retreat with dazed eyes. The pain still coursed through him, but it was overshadowed by a profound sense of awe and an overwhelming realization. He saw Alera, not as the unshifting girl he had so foolishly dismissed, but as the magnificent, powerful being who had just saved his life and by extension the entire Silverwood pack. The scattered fragments of the ancient prophecy, the whispers of a Luna with a hidden form, now clicked into place with startling clarity. He understood the deep, inexplicable connection he had felt with her, the pull that had defied logic. He understood that true strength was not always visible, not always in physical prowess, but could manifest in forms far grander and more potent than any wolf. He had been blind, bound by tradition and prejudice, and in his blindness, he had almost lost everything. His realization was a profound, humbling moment of truth, forever altering his perception of power, leadership, and the genuine meaning of strength. The battleground, once a scene of brutal chaos, now lay in a shaken silence, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the distant sounds of the fleeing Shadowfangs. The Silverwood pack was victorious, but the victory felt fragile, born out of an unimaginable intervention. Alera, her celestial form slowly dissolving back into the familiar contours of her human self, sank to the blood-soaked earth, utterly exhausted but miraculously stable. The golden glow faded, leaving her trembling, her skin clammy from the immense power that had coursed through her. She was conscious, but her mind reeled from the sudden, overwhelming influx of energy and its equally sudden withdrawal. The pack, still reeling from the immediate terror of the Shadowfangs, now stared at Alera with a mixture of disbelief, awe, and a palpable current of fear. They had just witnessed something beyond their comprehension, beyond their legends, and it left them profoundly unsettled. The elders and pack members who just hours before had openly mocked Alera, who had dismissed her as an anomaly, now approached her with hesitant paces, their faces etched with reverence and a deep, undeniable regret. Boren, the most vocal of the elders in his dismissal, was the first to bend a knee, his aged eyes wide with a mixture of contrition and wonder. "Alera," he rasped, his voice thick with emotion. "We were blind. We were fools, bound by our narrow understanding of strength and tradition. Forgive us." Others followed suit, their previous scorn replaced by expressions of profound respect, their heads bowed in a silent acknowledgement of their prejudice. They realized the true depth of their folly, the magnitude of their judgment, and the immense, unique strength that had lay hidden within Alera, a strength they had almost condemned their entire pack for overlooking. The whispers now were not of mockery, but of wonder, of a goddess walking among them. Alera herself was overwhelmed by the transformation, the sheer raw power that had surged through her. It was a dizzying, disorienting experience, like being struck by lightning and then perfectly restored. Her mind struggled to process the ancient power that had lain dormant within her, the celestial form that had manifested from the core of her being. What did it mean? Who was she truly? The unshifting human or this magnificent, ethereal guardian? The revelation of her true nature was exhilarating, yet terrifying. She had always yearned to belong, to be accepted for who she was, but this new identity, this immense power felt alien, separate. It raised more questions than it answered about her place in the world, in the pack, and in her own heart. She felt a profound sense of self-discovery, yet also a heavy burden of responsibility. The girl who had merely wished to be a part of something was now irrevocably changed, destined to be something far greater, far more consequential. Her body ached, not from injury, but from the spiritual expenditure, the sheer exertion of manifesting such a powerful form. Her mind felt stretched, trying to reconcile the vivid memory of soaring on wings of light with the mundane reality of her human hands. Leekin, still weak but now carefully tended to by the healers, watched her with an intensity that brooked no argument. His eyes held not just gratitude, but a dawning understanding, a profound connection that had finally been illuminated. The pack, once again united, but this time by shared awe and a burgeoning hope, began the somber task of tending to their wounded and honoring their fallen. The landscape changed, yes, but so too had the hearts and minds of the Silverwood pack. The old ways had been irrevocably challenged, not by rebellion, but by a divine intervention that forced them to see beyond their prejudices, to accept a truth far grander than their traditions had ever allowed. The air, still thick with the scent of battle, now carried a faint, almost imperceptible echo of starlight, a testament to the celestial guardian who had saved them all. Leekin, now fully recovered, his wounds mended by the Silverwood healers and Alara's own potent, if newly discovered restorative touch, stood before his pack. The assembly was hushed, every eye fixed on their Alpha King, and then inevitably on Alara, who stood modestly by his side. There was no doubt in his voice, no trace of the earlier indecision. His gaze, filled with a profound gratitude and an undeniable burning love, swept over Alara. He took her hand, his thumb gently tracing the back of her palm. "I stand before you today," Leekin began, his voice strong and clear, resonating with a newfound conviction, "a humbled alpha. I allowed tradition, fear, and the expectations of others to cloud my judgment, to blind me to true strength, to true leadership." He paused, his eyes meeting Alara's, a silent apology passing between them. "I made a mistake. I did not trust my instincts, my heart, which always knew where our true strength lay." He turned back to the pack, his declaration ringing with absolute sincerity. "I officially renounce my previous choice for Luna. It was a decision made under duress, and one that nearly cost us everything." His voice softened as he looked at Alara again, his devotion palpable. "Alara, my Luna, you saved my life, you saved our pack. You showed us a strength far beyond what we understood. My gratitude is boundless and my love for you unwavering." The Silverwood pack, no longer swayed by ancient prejudices, now witnessed the undeniable truth of Alara's power and her unwavering loyalty. They had seen her transform, seen her protect them, seen her stand as a beacon of hope against insurmountable odds. The whispers of doubt and scorn were utterly extinguished, replaced by a wave of unanimous acceptance, even reverence. This was not merely the Alpha's choice. It was a revelation that transcended their deepest held beliefs. Boren, the most senior elder, stepped forward, his eyes shining with tears. "Alpha Leekin speaks the truth," he proclaimed, his voice trembling with emotion. "We were lost in the shadows of our own traditions. Alara, you have shown us the true path. You are our Luna, not merely for your power, but for the purity of your spirit, your courage, and your boundless heart." One by one, then in a sweeping chorus, the entire Silverwood pack howled their assent, a sound of unity and acceptance that reverberated through the revitalized forest. It was a roar of profound recognition, a joyous affirmation of their new Luna. They accepted Alara, not despite her unique form, but because of it, understanding now that her difference was their greatest asset. With the pack's unanimous acceptance, Alara felt a sense of belonging she had yearned for her entire life. The immense power that had manifested within her no longer felt alien. It felt like a part of her, a natural extension of her being. She embraced her role as Luna with a quiet dignity and a profound understanding of the responsibility it entailed. Her unique form, once a source of shame and mockery, was now revered, a symbol of their pack's resilience and their capacity for growth. She understood that her celestial nature was not a weakness, but a strength that completed their pack, providing a balance to Leekin's raw, wolfish power. Together they represented a new paradigm of leadership, one that challenged and ultimately shattered their old, rigid traditions. Alara and Leekin, standing shoulder to shoulder, symbolized a new era for the Silverwood pack, an era where perceived weaknesses could become extraordinary strengths, and where true belonging was found not in conformity, but in embracing one's authentic, powerful self. The future, once uncertain, now glowed with the promise of a united, stronger, and more enlightened pack. Alara and Leekin, a pair forged in challenge and united by an extraordinary destiny, now ruled the Silverwood pack together, their combined leadership a testament to balance and strength. Their reign ushered in an era of unprecedented flourishing for the pack, a time marked not just by peace, but by a profound embrace of both their sacred traditions and the unique strengths that each member brought to their community. The Shadowfangs, having retreated in disarray and terror, never dared to encroach upon Silverwood territory again, their defeat a stark lesson in underestimating the power of the unexpected. Alera's true form, the magnificent celestial guardian, remained an enduring symbol of hope and protection, a whispered legend that struck fear into the hearts of any who contemplated malice against their lands. It was a power she wielded with immense responsibility and wisdom, manifesting only when the pack faced dire, existential threats, a silent promise of unparalleled defense. The Silverwood pack, once rigid in its adherence to conventional strength, evolved under their guidance, becoming known throughout the realm for its progressive outlook, its deep understanding that true power often resided in diversity, in the unconventional, in the heart and spirit that defied easy categorization. Lycan, ever the strong alpha, relied on Alera's profound intuition and unique perspective, understanding that her wisdom complemented his own, creating a leadership that was both formidable and deeply empathetic. Their decisions were always made with the well-being of every single pack member at heart, ensuring that no one, regardless of their individual abilities, ever felt ostracized or unworthy. The story concludes with Alera, finally at peace, her heart overflowing with a sense of complete belonging she had never thought possible. She walked beside Lycan, their hands clasped, a subtle yet powerful gesture of their enduring bond, their steps echoing the rhythm of a united future. Her gaze swept across her pack, seeing not the faces of those who once mocked her, but the faces of a family, a community that had learned to cherish every facet of its being. The children played freely, their laughter ringing through the sun-dappled glades, secure in the knowledge that their home was safe, protected by an Alpha and Luna who represented both ancient power and future promise. Alera saw herself reflected in their innocent eyes, a testament to how true strength often lies where it's least expected, in the quiet resilience, the hidden potential, the unwavering spirit that refuses to be diminished. The years of scorn, the pain of rejection, faded into the distant past, mere shadows against the incandescent light of her present. She had not only found her place and her purpose, but she had redefined what it meant to belong, what it meant to be strong. Her journey, fraught with trial and tribulation, had culminated in a beautiful, profound truth, that love in its purest form and acceptance, in its most genuine expression, possessed the power to conquer any prejudice, to heal any wound, and to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. The Silverwood pack thrived, a shining example of a realm where every heart had a home, and every soul was valued, all because one unshifting girl dared to embrace her destiny. Their legacy would be one of unity, foresight, and the eternal lesson that true greatness stemmed from the courage to be oneself, and the wisdom to embrace the unique gifts of all. The sun set, casting long golden shadows over the Silverwood territory, a perfect end to a story of transformation and triumph, a new beginning for a pack reborn. Don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe for more epic tales of love, destiny, and transformation. Click here to watch our next captivating story.